Gem International is a new diamond explorer in the richest diamond producing country in Africa, located next to the fourth largest producing diamond mine in the world. International Spotlight is on an 1109 carat diamond recently discovered in Africa by a fellow Canadian junior with a proven operator and finance team. Gem International trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol GI. Visit us at gemdiamondmining.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Martyn Element. He's a Vancouver marketing and corporate advisor who focuses on sourcing and pursuing new business ventures and opportunities no matter where they are on the planet. And today, he's on the planet kind of a little bit down under in Sydney, Australia. Welcome back to the show, Martyn.
Welcome to the show, Jim, and I think I've got a show that'll register as one of the most meaningful shows I've ever done because of this last couple of weeks, and what I've been doing is very, very different as a business. And so can we just go? I think the best thing is to run through the 2 weeks and see how we go, and you might have to cut me off. There's so much to talk about.
We'll never cut you off, Martyn. So go ahead, tell us about the stuff you discovered.
Well, I got here and I met up with an old friend of mine I've done a lot of business with in the past, Mr. Les Owen. Leslie's a broker at a company called Bell Potter, which is one of the most recognized brokerage firms in the country. They have, I think, 13 offices across the country. They're about to open an office in England as well, a small representative office. They're they rely very much so on analytical and research, and I have a long relationship with Les. Leslie Owen was the man that suggested to me 20 years ago that Australian companies could get better capitalization and might stand a better chance of funding up in Canada. I took him at his word, and I listed 12 companies into Australia on the TSX. And we had some tremendous success, and I think we've covered that subject before. So it was a very interesting time, and this time I have the idea of potentially reversing that, given that Australia arguably is the most advanced country in the world when it comes to investment and being involved in the lithium space. And we're all hearing a lot about the lithium space in Vancouver and on our markets here up in Canada. And I thought, we're going to feel I had a quality situation of what I'm working with, and I thought it was a chance to perhaps reverse the roles and come down here. I had some meetings here in Sydney, and then we took off to Melbourne to the Mines and Money show in Melbourne. Mines and Money also own the magazine, the Mining Journal, which is one of the most respected magazines and periodicals in the mining space in the world. It's now governed out of Perth, Australia, because it's owned by a group called Aspromont, which also owns the Mines and Money. Mines and Money is run by a fellow by the name of Alex Kent. He is the son of Andrew Kent. Andrew is still very much alive, but Andrew is 35 years of age and is very, very instrumental in developing Mines and Money into a very large, dare I say it, agglomerate. He's just raised $10 million. He said it wasn't easy. He did it in 10,000s and 50,000s. It wasn't an institutional type raise, but he got it done. A lot of the money came here out of Australia, and I was fortunate enough to spend an afternoon with him on a boat just before we went to Melbourne, and then we bumped into each other, and we had dinner on Sunday night before the Monday starting of the Mines and Money show. So what a fascinating dinner that was. Alex is from the software Microsoft side of the business, so he's bringing the tech side to Mines and Money worldwide. This is a group, listeners, that has conferences, Hong Kong, Melbourne, Australia, has the biggest conference of its kind in London, England, in about 3 weeks' time. It brings in, you name the speakers, it brings them in from all over the world. At this conference in Melbourne, they had people of the stature of Frank Holmes, and they also had the Martyn, the head of, he's the chairman of Goldcorp, and he's actually from Vancouver, actually. So it was a fascinating evening with Alex, though, because he was able to speak about what they're going to be doing and how they're bringing in a lot of technical aspect to this company. And I think we're going to see Minds and Money just get bigger and bigger, and they also see them potentially get involved in the financing side of the business, utilizing their Rolodex of well over 1 million contacts, as Alex was saying. And so that was a very interesting. The show itself was more of a show by the large corporations. There were some junior companies there, but there were some very, very worthwhile people, particularly from the Orient. And then on yesterday, we attended. I thought it would make sense to sit down with the ASX, and I have to say that Andrew Creech of the Toronto Stock Exchange venture was good enough to line me up with the head of listing and business development here in Sydney for the ASX, and we discussed many different aspects of what I was trying to achieve. I have to say they were very, very professional. They were very, very helpful. As you can imagine, they, not to say taking them for granted, but the fact or the chance of having a company do a financing down here in Australia and the chance of listing down here as well as listing up in Toronto in Canada, it was a great meeting, and they were very, very helpful, and it remains to be seen. But the most exciting part of the day, except for meeting these chaps, was they said, would you like to come down to the room where the new companies ring the bell when they've been listed? So they allowed me to, and my people that were with me to ring the bell and get the appropriate photographs. So it was an excellent trip here, business-wise, continues to be. And then I met, this last week, I met a legend here in Australia and spent a lot of time, quite a lot of time with him, Kevin Weldon. If you Google Kevin, you'll see he's in his early 80s now. But he was the man that gave the eulogy for Mr. Packer, Kerry Packer. He also gave the eulogy for Mr. Packer's brother. And it's not a very nice subject, but it gives you who this Mr. Weldon is. He's in publishing. He's been the largest publisher in Australia for many years. He was explaining to me the tale of the Conrad Black trying to do a deal with him, which they wasn't successful. He worked very, very close and still does work on a frequent basis. They speak, works very close with Rupert Murdoch. So Weldon was an amazing man to spend time with. He's also won a lot of awards for work in water safety and has been awarded the Order of Australia. And he had lunch with him again yesterday, and he's just a very wonderful man as a person, and I really, really enjoyed meeting him on my occasions, and I look forward to having further meetings with Kevin. So it was an exciting week. Now to get to the cream, the real cream, and the interesting week. Right in the middle of all this, we had the election, which in this country you were watching the day after, and we were watching, into the night. And what can I say? The pundits got it wrong. I'm sure the airwaves and I'm sure these podcasts have been full of it. I am not going to go into the whole subject in too much depth, other than it was really interesting to see it being interpreted here from Australia. The Premier of the country wasn't too bad on his criticisms of Trump. Mr. Turnbull had to do a little backtracking, but not too bad. The media down here have made some very big faux pas. The different stations that cover ABC were very, very pro-Hillary, and Sky was the opposite. So what has happened is that these different TV stations and these media outlets and newspapers are having to eat a tremendous amount of crow, but at the bottom line is that, they all called for the stock markets, as I'm sure they did in Canada and North America, to crash and burn, and of course it didn't happen. It was complete opposite, similar to the Britex scenario. And it's another example that the media and the pundits in high places within the industry do not run necessarily and do not get things right necessarily, and the media are trying to make news rather than reporting it. And there's a change. I talk about change. This is change. Now you have a very unusual man who, at the end of the day, has some tremendously, I think, bad parts to the gentleman, Mr. Trump, but he is a businessman. And it'll be really interesting to see how much he shakes up this establishment. And I think some of his things that he's proposing, personally speaking, I think are very good and exciting. And other ones I think are going to be very interesting to see whether they become destructive rather than constructive. Only time's going to tell. But I tell you one thing. We are in for one giant change going forward. And I've just remembered Ian Telford's name, who I met live just before he was speaking on the floor of the Melbourne Exchange. Lovely man that Mr. Telford is. So, you know, I have to throw that in there, listeners. I'm looking forward to coming back to Canada, and I feel that this is one of the most interesting. When I brought my first company up from Australia that I was working with up to Canada, it was called Kimberley Diamonds. And you know, the mind is a convenient thing, because I forgot that the first 2 or 3 months working with Kimberley were tough. We couldn't get traction, and people said, "We want to do what? You want to bring an Australian diamond company up to Canada? And why would you want to do that?" And then the second client I brought up was a gold company. It had the flavor of the month, which I don't like that expression, but and I financed within 6 or 8 weeks for $25 million, and my phone rang off the hook, and the game was on with the flow coming the other way. And, you know, it's not going to be easy first time down here. Oh, this is quite unusual what you're proposing, Mr. Element. But I did like the fact that Alex Kent of Minds and Money, who has a global view of business, he said, "Martyn, that's one of the most, how did he put it? That's one of the most doable, exciting things I've seen." He said, "In any role we can do to help you, I'm there, and I'd love to be involved in it." We're going to be attending the show in London at the end of this month and beginning of December. So it'll be interesting to see what that translates into. But yes, it's exciting because I'm exploring, I'm frontiering, I'm doing something very unusual, and that it can be tough. But if it works, it can be very, very rewarding, of course. And today I am having lunch with Mr. Anthony Gray. Anthony is the man that found the largest uranium deposit here in Australia many, many years ago. He's a Canadian lawyer. He's a writer. He's an actor. He's a philanthropist. He's done extremely well. I think he's in his late 70s now, early 80s. Charming man. Very, very bright gentleman. He's still in the industry, and he is wanting to sit down because I financed the company he was involved in, which was probably the most successful Aussie company I brought up from Australia, called Kingsgate Consolidated, which went to a 30-cent financing with Canaccord. Let's just say it was a very successful deal, and it went as high as $12 a share, and is still very much around, although 20 years on it's having some problems, I think, working within the country of Thailand. Perhaps it got too big for its boots, but it was a tremendously successful deal. Well, Tony was one of the main principals in that company, and I'm looking forward to lunch with Tony because he's so educated in the world of mining and resource and many other things too.
We'll have more with Martyn Element from Sydney, Australia, right after this.
I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese, Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Martyn Element, who is in Sydney, Australia right now. Martyn, what kind of a synergy do you get between Canadian and Australian miners? They seem to be kind of the same mindset. They don't care what kind of obstacles they face. They go and do it.
Well, they do now. But what I've seen, the other thing that triggered me, there's been a tremendous amount of Australians, as you will see from the news releases, up buying positions and getting involved in companies up in Canada, listed in Canada. And I'm going to watch what I'm going to say here. I think that a lot of the things that they're looking at and have been getting involved with aren't, who am I to say? But I think the fact that they were coming in such large numbers and taking these big positions, I thought, well, why not go down to them? So that's my philosophy. Of course, they're very big, have been in the past big on what we call spodumene lithium, which is the hard rock version, and that's what's very prominent here in Australia. They're beginning to get more aggressive into the brine salts or brines in Chile and Argentina. So yes, you're quite right. They're aggressive. But when I did my thing 20 years ago, plus they weren't that. They were very nationalistic and weren't that big on things outside of their own country. These days they are. Yes, you're quite right, Jim. And I'm sort of, I'm thinking that's a positive situation.
I was going to say, several years ago, Australia seemed to be about 10 years behind the times. It's not like that anymore, is it?
No, and they're very pro-business, of course. The dollar is stronger than our dollar, which is new in my lifetime. We've always been sort of 5% or more higher than the Aussie dollar, and much higher than the New Zealand dollar. I don't know where that is now, or the New Zealand, but I know the Aussie dollar is higher than and doing better than our dollar, though it's been swinging around like a lot of currencies the last few days. So no, they seem to have things that they're a little worried over here because they're part of they've been working very, very, very hard with a free trade agreement between, I think it's 10 or 12 Asian countries, and Trump is already saying quite strongly he thinks he's going to try and break that up, which of course would severely affect Australia. So they're quite worried about that. They have the opposition politicians here in Australia have been very vocal about the dislike of Mr. Trump and are standing their ground on that. They are not wavering. They are not taking back anything they've already said, which of course is, could be considered to be dumb. Changing gears again on you here, Jim, I can't resist to mention it, that, just think of it this way, listeners. Obama went over to England, and the Englishmen and the Brits took it quite objectionably, a lot of them, that an American came and interfered with the Britex, before Britex. And he went on record as saying that they will be put at the back of the queue if they were to vote to leave Britex, and how bad it would be, and all the awful things that could happen with the United States and the management after the fact if they decided to vote to leave. Almost a threatening gesture. Well, now, of course, the verses, if you want to look at it that way, you've got a very, very, very similar parallel that's happened here with the voting in of Trump. And I think I've read or heard, or one of his acceptance speech, that, Britain, we have a special relationship with Britain, and he sees them going to the front of the queue now, given what's happened in Great Britain. So there's some brinksmanships going on. Talk is not cheap, but talk is out there, and it's interesting to see the currencies and these markets reacting once again completely backwards to what some of these. I'm not a big fan of the word experts, as I've mentioned before on air, but it's really to say it's going to be an interesting time in the next 6 to 12 months would be an understatement, Jim.
Well, Martyn, it's always a pleasure talking to you, especially when you're in some foreign location. And by the way, not every media person had the election wrong. The Goddard Report had Trump winning, and Gerald Celente, who was on This Week in Money with us, he had a Trump victory several weeks ago. So some people had their pulse on what was really happening.
Well, I think that there are going to be, in the Sky television station here in Australia, which is more of a rebel station, they feel that they had overall they were calling for a Trump victory, and some of the things they were basing it on went back to the certain things that were said that just turned them and said that's it. I don't see I don't see anything else but Trump winning. So it was an interesting, and it's going to continue to be a huge debate, as it has been with the Britex still going on and churning, and people thinking they can still revote and the Blur rights of the world. But we'll see, Jim. It'll be an exciting time, but it's still time to make money. When this isn't a money advice, it's really a reporting podcast, as you know. But keep your wits about you, listeners. Use your use your best people you can find for your advising on any investment or any thoughts that you're thinking of doing, and it'll be a great show again in 2 weeks after I spent two weeks back in Canada, and then I think in 2 weeks' time, Jim, I could be in England, but it'll be damn close if I'm not.
Martyn, thanks again.
Thank you so much, Jim, and it's been so enjoyable talking to you all today.
My guest has been Martyn Element, and he was speaking to us from Sydney, Australia. You're listening to HowStreet.com radio. Find us on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. You can forward questions to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.